My neighbor has been stalking me for a month. I'm a female. I have noticed my neighbor doing some pretty creepy shit. The initial encounter was about a month ago while I was walking my dog up the street that's about a quarter mile from my house. The man was talking with a group of people, I think 3, and as I walked by he ran up to pet my dog. He was asking me questions about my dog, such as name and gender. He then began to ask me questions about where I lived, but more so asking for confirmation, as if somehow he already knew. This made me uncomfortable, so I went to leave, and then he attempted to give me a hug and a kiss on the cheek. Previous to this, I had never met this person. After walking away, I thought the whole situation was weird, but would proceed with caution in the future. Since then, there has been more encounters with this neighbor, such as, I was walking up the street with my significant other. Then the neighbor seemed to be waiting for us as we were walking by. Without saying anything, he began calling our dog and trying to pet him. He continued this even as we were walking away. This was 2 days after the initial encounter. He drove by the house about 10 times within a short period of time. This happened at night while my boyfriend and I were walking our dog. When he saw us, he slowed down, turned on his hazards, flashed his headlights, honked, and shouted, "Hey," out the window with his music blasting. The song he was blasting happened to be Window Shopper by 50 Cent. The circling around the block began after we got into the house. This happened 2 weeks ago. He was in his vehicle waiting on the edge of the property. I noticed him when I walked outside with my dog, and then he quickly drove off. This happened 4 or 5 days after the circling. He was lurking at a stop sign in front of my home. As I was returning home from walking my dog, I noticed the neighbor standing near the stop sign, looking towards my home. He ran off when he noticed that I had seen him. This happened 4 days ago. Tonight, he was waiting in his vehicle on the edge of the property where he had a clear view of the basement door. He was noticed by some guests as they left through the door and proceeded to drive off. All of these encounters happened to coincide with when I walk my dog, 4 times a day. I noticed that he tends to be outside more around the times that I would normally walk my dog. In that situation, I would go back inside and wait 45 minutes to walk, or go to the dog park for an hour instead. Unfortunately, we weren't able to record these encounters, but plan to start recording our walks from start to end, along with when we go outside, just in case he's there. The frequency has made me feel targeted, as well as unsafe while walking my dog. I have taken a photo of his license plate, but I don't have much more physical evidence. I'd like to call the police, but without evidence, I doubt they can do anything. Any recommendations would be greatly appreciated. Edit, because some of you think I'm just gonna be nice to someone who grabbed me in the middle of the street. I was polite to him when he asked about my dog. I never answered his confirming questions about my home. After that moment, I was no longer polite. We have told him to fuck off, and the dog has snapped at him. For those of you saying he just loves the dog, who tries running up to a 50+ pound dog that's baring his teeth and growling at them? I moved out of the state to a very small town. First day of moving in, a neighbor walking his dog greets me and introduces himself to me. He gave me a quick rundown that the neighborhood is full of tweakers and other shady types. I took that as a general warning that may be all I have to deal with. A few months later, he invited me over to his place to teach me how to do some woodwork. As we were making a shelf for my cat to sit on, he starts asking me questions. To me, they were normal everyday questions, but looking back, I realize now that he was trying to get information out of me. Why did you move out here from out of state? Who lives with you? Do you have any other family members in the state or area? Once we were all done, we went to install the shelf, and he met my mom who stays with me. He talks to her for a bit, and then we left to walk back to his place. He starts telling me that he could see our yard from his place and noticed I barely go outside with my dogs. Told me not to worry, that if someone breaks into our place, he can see them and shoot them from his room. That's what I'm thinking. How is this possible because you live about a half block away? Before I can question him, he asked me if I want to see more of the town. I'm like, yeah, let's go. He walks to his car and pulls out something from his middle compartment and tells me to go into his pickup truck. So I do, while he's filling up the tank with gasoline. Once he's done, he walks to the driver's side and opens the door and drops the holster between us. He tells me not to worry about it as I look, trying to see if it has a gun or not. As we're driving, I realize he hasn't said a word for about 5 minutes, and this guy loves to hear his own voice. Another thing I noticed is that we're on a dirt road, and I haven't seen a single house, trailer, or vehicle for a while. I guess I gave off some nervous vibes because he suddenly goes, "So yeah, unless you know where you're going out here, you'll get lost, and it's best to have a pickup or ATV to drive here." After about another 10 minutes of silent driving, we get to a little creek. Luckily, there was another truck there. All he says is, "Oh, look at that. Someone else is here with us," and grabs his holster and gets out. We both see a lady with a big dog playing in the water. She turns to us and sees him walking closer to her. She gestures to his holster, and he tells her not to worry, that it's for snakes. She lifts her shirt above her waist to show her gun, and she tells him that she's not worried a bit. They talk for a few minutes, and she tells him that her husband is waiting for her to make dinner, and she's just out letting her dog have some playtime. The neighbor changes his tone and posture from confident to defensive now. She called her dog and then went back to her truck. He was watching her, and she hadn't started her truck yet. A few minutes pass, and he tells me I guess it's time to go too. When we get to his truck, she drives off. The drive back, I started getting uneasy and creeped out. Why'd you drive me all the way out there just to leave? Why tell me not to worry about the holster gun, but tell the lady what it's for? I finally get out of my head and just break the silence and give him my life story as to why I moved. Finally, he responds that he can relate to my story and gives me the rundown of how this town is and what it's about, and that some people are more racist than others, and I should watch my back for that. Once we get back to his place, I tell him I have stuff to take care of at home and nope the hell out of there. I said to myself that if I'm ever going to hang out with him again, it won't be alone. This just happened a few hours ago, but I'm not really sure if it's a case for concern. I'm just feeling very uncomfortable after. I'm a 20-year-old female. I live with 2 other women, but our boyfriends stay over frequently. I was outside with my parents and boyfriend, handing out candy for some trick-or-treaters, when I saw my neighbor come outside. When we moved in, we quickly met our surrounding neighbors and the 2 that lived directly across the street. Turns out the guy's an addict and the wife has a medical condition, so she stays inside a lot. The husband approached me and my family and was generally pleasant to talk to before it turned incredibly uncomfortable. After about 30 minutes of speaking, he wouldn't leave. He began to accuse me and my roommates of throwing garbage in his can. He then went into detail about how he had it on camera and that there was a pair of underwear in the garbage bag. He described the person on the cameras as short and stout. I am 5'10", and you'll see why I'm saying this. He continues to go on about how his wife got mad at him because one of us did it, but he isn't too mad and isn't trying to get us in trouble. After about 15 minutes of this, his wife sends him a photo of my Facebook profile and says that's the person's name that was on the papers in the garbage. At that point, my parents went in and my boyfriend and I are alone with this man. He's saying that I must have done it and kept asking me why I put my underwear on the top. But my roommates and I have never thrown anything in his trash. I found their Facebooks and blocked them because it creeped me out. And he said that his wife tried to call the police about it. My parents just brushed it off, but I still feel uneasy. What do you guys make of this? Edit. I feel like I left a few things out because I wrote it very late last night. That being said, he also said my ex-roommate used to flirt with him while she would cut our grass. He also came to our door once and asked for Amanda, my last name, but neither my cousin or myself are named Amanda. He never said why he was at the door, and after we told him no, he just kinda took a minute and left, and we never heard anything since. He also mentioned of having a lot of guns and exclusively said not to piss off his wife before the accusations started. This happened in 2019. I no longer have contact with this person. When my husband and I lived in our first apartment together, I did not have a job. We had just moved to a new city and I had trouble finding anything. Naturally, I was at home because of this. Every day at the same time, I would walk Remy, 7-year-old female. We would always walk the same route in front of the leasing office across the street, by the basketball courts, and by the tennis courts before walking the rest of the property of the apartment complex. The first encounter I had with this guy gave me a ton of red flags, and I did report him to the leasing office because of his behavior. As I was walking Remy back home, this man who looks like he was in his 40s, glasses, gray hair, was walking from the basketball courts to the sidewalk. I stopped Remy because she was going to try to jump on him if she got close enough. He noticed us and asked, "Is she aggressive?" I told him, no, she will just jump, and I know some people don't like dogs or dogs jumping around them. He looked me up and down, stared at my chest for a second, then asked if he could pet her. I said sure, because Remy's tail was going a million miles an hour, and she was wanting to meet the new person. He started talking to me while he was petting Remy. "I'm Joe. I just moved across the street. What's your dog's name?" I was nice to him, even though I had a weird feeling while talking to him. "This is Remy. I'm Megan. I live next to the groundskeeper with my fiancée. You'll like it here. The staff are awesome." The entire time I was talking, he was petting Remy and staring at my chest. Joe thanked me for letting him pet my dog and turned around to leave. I was weirded out but brushed it off and told myself it was probably nothing. I walked Remy the rest of the way home, but I noticed that Joe had went into the entrance of the apartment building but was watching me walk home through the glass. I hightailed it the rest of the way to the apartment. It freaked me out enough that I called the leasing office and told them that Joe was watching me walk home after meeting me and I was generally uncomfortable with him. I also had them come fix the blinds in the dining room because I didn't want anyone looking inside our apartment. After I loaded myself into the car and drove to my mother-in-law's house, I stayed there until my now husband got home. Anytime I walked Remy, and eventually Peach, my other dog, Joe was always somehow outside when I was. He always tried to come talk to me and pet my dogs. Luckily, when I got Peach, she would growl at him. She was and still is very protective of me. If I ever walked my dogs with my husband, he would never come talk to me. It was only if I was alone with Remy or if I was completely alone. He also would start walking in the front of our apartment when my husband wasn't home. He would try to look through the sliding glass door to get a glimpse of me. My husband and I decided to move to a bigger apartment because we needed more space for the dogs and ourselves. The day I got our keys for our new apartment, just down the street, I had another experience with Joe that made me call the cops. I was walking both dogs around the block so I could finish up some last-minute packing. I saw Joe pull into the complex in his car. I stopped to let him go past me, but he waved me across the road. When I did cross, he pulled around really fast with his window already rolled down. "Hey Megan, I was wondering, are you happy with your husband? If not, I can help you out." He looked me up and down and gave me a wink. I acted like I didn't hear him since I had my headphones in. I immediately went outside and locked the door behind me. I called the leasing office and told them what happened. I also let them know that I was going to call the cops, at least to make a report because his behavior was freaking me out and I wanted to at least have it documented. I called the non-emergent line and an officer came out. I told him what happened that day and some of the other creepy behavior from Joe before. The cop asked me, "Do you want me to give him a warning not to talk to you?" I said yes. I thanked the officer for his time and he took my name and phone number down. Then he went to the leasing office to talk to the staff about the situation. About an hour after the cop left, he gave me a call. He told me he talked to the property manager, and he also ran Joe's license plate number. Told me that the leasing office has some other complaints from other tenants on file. He also mentioned he didn't get a chance to talk to him because Joe was already leaving as the cop arrived at the leasing office. I thanked him again for his time and finished packing. I decided to go to the leasing office to talk to the property manager just to clear up anything just in case. When I got there, the manager told me that Joe had multiple reports just like the officer told me. She also told me that she was going to have her on-site officer stop and talk to him and encourage him not to talk to me or any female residents. I thanked her and went home to start moving little things until my husband got home. I went almost 6 months without another incident from Joe. We moved to the 3rd floor and he didn't have any idea which apartment it was, so he couldn't bother us. I also made a point to have my dogs on certain schedules so I never run into him if we were out. The last time Joe tried to talk to me, I turned around and walked away. I didn't let him get a word in. I did notice him harassing my neighbor outside when she was grilling one day. I told the leasing office about it just in case. A couple months later he moved out because they wouldn't let him re-sign his lease. That was the last I saw of Joe. I carried a stun gun with me while I walked my dogs or by myself because of him. I was fully prepared to shock his ass a couple times if he ever got too close after I called the cops on him. I'm 20 now, and this took place when I was 13 or 14 years old. Though it's important that I know, I've always been a bigger, older looking guy. At the time of the story, I was roughly 6'1", 200 pounds, and I was in moderately decent shape since it was football season. I guess I just thought since I was such a big guy, nothing could ever happen to me. This story is about the night that proved me wrong. One night, I had gotten into an argument with my parents and needed to take a walk to blow off some steam. I had a set route I usually take to get to the park located on the other side of my neighborhood. By the time I arrived at the park, nightfall had already set in. I made my way to the only lit corner of the park, sat down at a bench, and began listening to music on my phone. I should note that I'm completely comfortable dropping my guard, as this was during a time where my relationship with my family was a bit strained, so coming here had become something of a regular occurrence. A few songs in, I noticed a car pull up in an unlit side of the park, which proceeds to immediately turn the headlights off. It was a silver SUV, but I couldn't tell the model or how many people were in the vehicle from where I was sitting. I didn't think much of it at first, as this really wasn't anything out of the ordinary. My neighborhood is rather large and divided into multiple parts, so people would frequently get lost trying to navigate it. I simply assumed that the driver had stopped to pull up directions on their phone. Nearly a good 10 minutes would pass and the vehicle still hadn't moved, which began to make me a bit nervous for some reason. The thought crossed my mind that whoever was in the car could be watching me, and as unlikely as that seemed, it was enough to get me to leave the park. As I was getting up, the vehicle turned its headlights back on. A sick feeling formed in my stomach, and I quickly made my way out of the park, breaking my usual route to ensure that I didn't have to go near that car. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to call my mom to come pick me up, but given the argument we just had, I stupidly convinced myself that calling her wouldn't be the right thing to do. I made my way to the end of the block, mentally preparing myself to wrap around the block and start heading back in the direction of the park, as that was my only way home. Just seconds later, as I reached the end of my block, the same car pulled out in front of me and came to a screeching stop. Not quite processing what happened, I simply stopped and watched the driver. An older man with a baseball cap and an unsettling smile that I could just barely make out in the darkness of the car. "Hey, you okay, buddy? You need a ride somewhere?" There wasn't anything out of the ordinary about his voice, but as he spoke to me, my stomach tied itself in knots. All I could do was mutter out a soft, "No," before the man reached all the way over and opened the passenger side door. "Hop in. I can take you anywhere you like, buddy." Snapping me out of the state of shock, I darted off behind the car without saying another word. I heard the man try to call out for me as I started running, but I couldn't make it out. I heard the car speed off as I continued trying to put as much distance between me and him as I possibly could. I made it a good few blocks away before I felt completely comfortable enough to stop running and decided to finally start making my way back home. Not long after, I heard a car coming up behind me into a quick stop, which made my heart feel like it was about to shoot out my chest. My nerves settled pretty quickly as I realized it was my mom, who set out looking for me when I didn't come home. She rolled down her window and began yelling at me to get in the car, but something was off in her voice. She didn't seem angry, but more so panicked. I did as she said, asking her what was wrong as we pulled off. She told me that she had just been at the park to look for me and saw the car, which had the same description as the one I encountered, partially blocking the road to shine its headlights into the park. She said as she pulled up, the car quickly backed out and sped off. Call it mother's intuition, I guess, but she immediately assumed I was involved somehow. Though I denied anything happening, as I've never really been someone who could talk about anything real with my family, my mom still reported the car to the police, and that was that. I never told my family what happened, and I haven't really ever spoken about this until now. This situation didn't stop me from going out for walks when I needed to de-stress, but I guess you can just credit that to me being a stupid teenage boy. I was certainly more cautious about my surroundings, like I said. That was that. I never saw the man again, and I moved on with my life. I can look back now and use this as an interesting story to tell people, but I truly was incredibly lucky to get out of that situation unharmed. Who knows what would have happened if I hadn't decided to leave the park, or if I hadn't been able to get away. Would I really have been able to bring myself to fight back if I needed? Maybe I wouldn't be here now, or maybe I would have been left with a much worse memory of that night. All I can say without a doubt is this man truly had awful intentions, and I'm very lucky to be here now. Moral of the story, be careful when you go out for walks at night, and always be aware of your surroundings. It doesn't matter who you are, anything can happen if someone has bad intentions. Not sure if this is the best subreddit to post this question on, but I didn't know where else to post. We recently moved into a house in a densely populated suburb located in the Midwest. More specifically, this neighborhood is located in an area where 2 miles south can be described as rough. Where we are actually located is okay, but not great. The homes in the neighborhood are humble homes that were built in the 40s or 50s. 2 houses down from our house is a 1-story yellow house that has always had 3 minivans parked in the driveway. The odd thing about this house is that the young men and young women seem to live in their vans. We first noticed this summer. We would walk by and see them laying on the mattresses in the vans with all their windows and doors open. They'd be sleeping or watching something on a laptop and have a long power cord that ran from the van to the house. No matter how hot the day was, they were in the van. I never once saw them coming from the house, just always in the van. The vans are parked right up the sidewalk in their driveway. Fast forward to now, and they are still in their van with an extension cord running to the house. This state we live in has cold winters. We're talking about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. It's worth noting that I have seen lights on inside the house. I have never seen any sort of construction or maintenance happening in or around the house, nor have I seen anything else on the property or living in the house. Any ideas to why they would be living in their vans when it seems like they have a house right there they could be more comfortable living in?